back with another soap opera diagnosis for the week. Today, gonna be just talking about General Hospital because we had Tabyana Ali's debut as Trina on GH. I think she had a good first episode. She had chemistry as Trina with everyone she was in a scene with, but especially with Joss. So they had good friend chemistry. Now, where this storyline is going, it seems, is going to be rough because it seems as though Trina is likely to eventually be arrested. At least that's the speculation for the most part, that Trina will be arrested, wrongfully arrested, for the supposed sex tape crime. Before we get to that, let's first talk about how I felt about Friday's episode. I think there was stuff I like and stuff I didn't like. Esme's likely fake pregnancy aside, whatever. First of all, I don't know why they are just trying to throw so many roadblocks to Trina and Spencer all at once. It's not good storytelling, and I'm sick of people saying this is the classic pace for classic couples. This is what soap operas used to do. I don't know who y'all are talking about, but at least when the era when soap operas were actually good and actually knew how to write good love stories, aka pre-1995 or 1996, no, there was not this much slow build-up without any payoffs. There wasn't. Now I like that, and hopefully it stays this way, that Joss and Cam will believe Trina and are pretty certain that Esme is the one that set all of this up with the sex tape. Because if they were to go the other route, then Joss and Cam look like the shittiest of friends, and once again we have to go back to, why is Trina in this friend group with a bunch of white people when she lives in New York? Doesn't make sense. I didn't like how they made Trina apologize to Joss for fighting with Joss when she had every right to be upset with Joss, because Joss was giving Esme info about Trina to pull Trina into the drama in the first place. So propping up Joss, using Trina to do so once again, similar to how they prop up Carly all the time. I don't know what the obsession is to make Joss similar to her mother, because it's just going to have a negative effect on the character, because if you have to prop a character so much, it kills all the storylines that they are in. Carly eats up the show enough, but I'll get to her during the General Hospital rankings when I get to the rankings here in a few days or later in the week or whenever I start posting rankings on the channel for March. But like similar to my last day's video about Daniel Jonas and why he was number one in my list, if you have to prop a character so much to ruin other characters around him, it just doesn't work. It's terrible storytelling. But you can expect nothing less from this producer. But as for the story overall, I just don't think it's wise for General Hospital to continue to go into this direction. I'm going to be blunt and savage while I say that General Hospital writers Dan O'Connor and Chris Van Etten don't have talent. They don't have talent, especially to continue to put the only young black woman character on the show into these kind of scenarios that have real life implications. They don't have the talent to pull it off, and continuing to write the show colorblind is even worse, in my opinion. We already see that these two men struggle to write for the women characters in general. If you are going to have minority characters on these shows, you should at least try to actually write them as minority characters. But these two don't have the talent to do that. We already saw what came of the cabin story, where I've talked about this a lot on this channel already, but when Trina was the only black person on this trip with a bunch of white people, and how that had real life implications after she was massively drugged by a lot of drugs. That was idiotic writing, which still has no follow-up. And then, now, we might see the young black female character, Trina, be arrested for a crime she didn't commit. And do you think the show is going to give us real-life implications of that? I would be shocked. But even if they do you think they're going to do a good job of it? No. I don't think these two have it in them to actually give brilliant writing. And we all already know that Valentini is terrible at his job. I've outlined that for months now. And I'm also just sick of the people online that say, well, wait for it to play out. Wait for it to play out. But you can't say that in one hand and then also not take into account the history of soap operas in general with the bad writing or the lack of writing for the black characters on these shows. So you have to take history into account. You have to take into account Valentini's history of completely messing with the One Life to Live interracial couples that he used to do. And we also can't act like Valentini has ever had balanced writing. He has always used a lot of black characters on One Life to Live and General Hospital as props to try and make the white characters more popular or to just build up the white characters. So you have to take this history into account. You also have to take into account that Trina has been on the show for 3 years and yet to have a real love interest or a real love story play out after 3 years. How long do you want people to wait? That's absurd. That's just stupid. This is why I think General Hospital needs to continue to be looked at very closely because, this show is owned by Disney and we know how Disney has tried to be very woke or fake woke in quotation marks over the past few years especially. I mean, they are the ones that had that mandate in the first place that came down and fell on ABC shows like General Hospital and is why Steve Burton is no longer on the show. That's all well and good and all, but in the same hand, you can't have one of your shows owned by Disney continue to write these stories like this and not be socially aware. That doesn't make any sense. And I've always found that the more aggressive of an approach to these kinds of issues, the better. For years, we've had to complain about the competition reality shows like Survivor and Big Brother to try and change their ways when it comes to casting. There's still a lot left there to change their ways when it comes to people working in production, in editing. It's the same with soap operas. I think the more aggressive approach, the better. That's why I keep getting so pissy with certain soap opera journalists, in quotation marks once again, because they just always kiss asses rather than actually try to call this shit out when it needs to be called out. So I'm going to see how this all plays out. I mean, I will give it a chance, but I don't have any trust in these writers, in this producer, in the history of soap operas. And one last group that I'm over are the group that say, it's just a soap opera. It's just a soap opera. There was actually a time when soap operas were leading the way in putting social issues on TV. They were leading the way with strong writing in the 70s and 80s. But they don't do that anymore. They've devolved into shit shows, circuses, over-the-top stories, really bad writing, producers that don't care, producers that might save money but creatively suck the life out of the show. So what's even the point? So you could say it's just a soap opera. But if you're going to be a soap opera on TV, if you're going to be a soap opera that is owned by Disney, you would think we can get either a stronger producer or stronger writers, or they would actually just care to change the ways of the history of soap operas when it comes to black characters. So I do think the show needs to be on notice about how they handle the future of this story, and if they are ever going to actually give some payoffs to Trina and Spencer, because it's well overdue. It's absurd the amount of roadblocks that they have put on this with bad writing instead of with no payoffs. It's just absurd at this point, to say the very least. That is all for now. We're going to see how this story plays out. We'll see how low GH is in my rankings for March. That will be coming up soon. I mean, it's hard to be as bad as Days of Our Lives right now, but GH ain't that much better, if I'm being honest. The slow pace of the writing, the slow pace doesn't work on this show. This is why it doesn't work. It is because the two head writers don't have talent. The two head writers have proved that they don't know how to build a story properly, because stories need layers, and within layers you have to have some payoffs that are at least way more sooner than a year or a year and a half down the line. That is not good writing for a soap opera. It's just not. So if there was stronger writing, the slow pace might be able to work. But because there isn't, it doesn't work. And the show isn't good right now, in general. Not just this story, almost all of them.